It is a pleasure to be out here with so many friends tonight. And it's a pleasure to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that's the role of government in a free society. However, I'm only given 35 minutes, and we professors are kind of programmed to 55 minutes. And so I'm going to omit some things, and so you'll just have to be satisfied spending the rest of your life not knowing those things. I think that at the start we should recognize what is the cornerstone of liberty, and hence justice. Well, I think that we begin by acknowledging at least the first principle, and that is each of us owns ourself. That is, I belong to me, I am my private property, and you are your own private property. No one has the right to own another person, at least without his permission. Now, if we accept this first principle, then certain standards of behavior and government obligations necessarily follow. Murder and other acts of violence must be prohibited because they violate self-ownership. Self-ownership also implies that we must own what we produce. Indeed, an operational definition of slavery is that the person toils while having no ownership rights to the fruits of his toil. They're owned and or controlled by someone else. Thus, private or collective theft violates the principle of self-ownership. Finally, self-ownership implies that two or more individuals should be free to engage in peaceable, voluntary exchange without the interference by third parties. Now, the protection of these rights, called natural law by philosopher John Locke and others, and referred to in the United States Declaration of Independence as unalienable rights, constitute the proper role of a moral government. In other words, the role of government is to protect people from domestic aggression, to protect you and I from foreign attack, and through a judiciary system resolve disputes that arise among the citizens. Now, accompanying the rapid rise of the welfare state in our society, or some people would call it state socialism, federal, state, and local governments in varying degrees have made significant departures from these moral government functions. And hence, government in our country, clearly the federal government in our country, is losing legitimacy. The welfare state is evil and immoral because it violates one of the most basic foundations of self-ownership. That is, the right to own what you and I produce. In other words, the welfare state is a political process whereby the property rights belonging to one person, is confiscated and given to another person to whom it does not belong. And since the welfare state institutionalizes theft, it violates two basic tenets of Christianity found in the Ten Commandments. The first being, thou shalt not covet, and the second, thou shalt not steal. Now, I'm quite sure when the Ten Commandments were given to Moses, I don't believe God meant that thou shalt not steal unless you got a majority vote. Now, and matter of fact, I probably meant as well, thou shalt not be a recipient of stolen property as well. Now, the primary justification for the attack on self-ownership in our country, at least that sponsored by otherwise decent people, can be found in people's desire for government to do good things. We say government should help the poor. Government should help failing businesses. Government should help college students. Government should help senior citizens. Government should help other deserving segments of our society. While these may be laudable objectives, the fact of the matter is that government has no resources of its very own. And what I mean by that is that these programs coming out of Washington or your state capitals, they do not represent congressmen and senators and legislators reaching in their own pockets to send out the money. Moreover, there's no tooth fairy or Santa Claus giving them the money. Now, when you recognize that government does not have any resources of its very own, that forces you to recognize that the only way the government can give one American citizen $1 is to first, through intimidation, threats, and coercion, confiscate that $1 from some other American. Now, if you believe I'm being too loose with the terminology intimidation, threats, and coercion, and you don't know what I'm talking about, well, you have April 15th to check me out. You can tell the agents of Congress that I do not want what rightfully belongs to me, what I rightfully earn, going to bail out savings and loans, or going out as crop subsidies, or going out as food stamps. You will see all the intimidation, threats, and coercion that you want to see, and if you act too rigorously in the defense of what is rightfully yours, you will get shot. In a moral society, I believe that voluntary exchange should be maximized and involuntary exchange minimized. Or maybe a better way of looking at it, and actually a preferable way of looking at it, is that I tell people I love seduction, but I'm against rape. Now, let me give you the essence of seduction. Seduction occurs when we proposition our fellow man in the following fashion. We say to him, we proposition him, we say, if you make me feel good, I'll make you feel good. And for those of you who remember your game theory, we call that a positive sum game. That is, both parties in their own estimation benefit from seduction. And I'll give you an example. Seduction happens all the time. I walk into my grocer with $2 in my hand and I proposition him. I say, if you make me feel good, give me that gallon of milk. I'll make you feel good, give you $2. And after that transaction has occurred, he is better off because he values the $2 more than he valued the milk. And I'm better off because I value the milk more than the $2. That's what I mean by a positive sum game, a win-win. Now, on the other hand, rape is the kind of transaction when we proposition our fellow man in the following way. We say to him, if you don't make me feel good, I'm going to make you feel bad. We call that a zero-sum game. That is, in order for one person to be better off, of necessity, somebody else has to be worse off. And that would be where I walked into the grocer with a gun in my hand. And I would say to him, if you don't make me feel good, give me that gallon of milk, I'm going to make you feel bad, blow your brains out. Now, clearly, I am better off, but he is worse off. Now, by the way, a lot of people tell me, they say, Williams, we live in a democracy, and the programs that you identify as rape are a result of majority rule. Well, I tell these people that I don't find gang rape any better than individualized rape. That is, just because you vote to rape somebody doesn't make it right. And then additionally, after I tell the person that, I say, moreover, the framers of the Constitution guaranteed us a republic and not a democracy. Now, in my opinion, the best test for determining immoral government acts is one suggested by the great philosopher economist Frederick Bastiat, and I'd urge all of you to read the book The Law if you haven't done so. And he said, the test for immoral government acts, he said, see if government benefits one citizen at the expense of another by doing what the citizen himself cannot do without committing a crime. Now, what Bastiat would mean by this is that I could see some elderly lady sleeping on a grate in the dead of winter in downtown Chicago. And I could walk up to Ed Crane with a gun in my hand. I can say, Ed, give me your $200, give me your $300. Then having gotten his $300, I go down and buy the lady some housing, some medical attention, and some food. Would I be guilty of a crime? Of course I would be guilty of a crime. I would be guilty of theft. Now, most Americans can agree with me on that. But the difficult question is there any conceptual distinction between that act, where I walked up to Ed and demanded $300, and when the agents of Congress, the IRS, come up to me and say, Williams, you know that $300 you made last week that you planned to buy some Lafite Rothschild Bordeaux wine with? You will not do that with it. You will give it to us, and we will go downtown and help the lady out. Well, I assert that there's no conceptual distinction between those two acts. Both acts involve forcibly taking that which belongs to one person and giving it to another to whom it does not belong. Now, if you press me for a distinction, there's only one distinction I see, and it is very trivial distinction for moral people, and that is the first act where I walked up to Ed and took his money. That is illegal theft. The second act is legal theft. It's an issue of legality. But for moral people, we should not allow legality alone to be our talisman. Because there are many things in this world that are and have been legal, but clearly immoral. Slavery was legal. Did that make it moral? Apartheid in South Africa was legal. The Nazi persecution of Jews and the concentration camps and the Maoist and Stalinist purges, they were all legal, but clearly immoral. In other words, we must ask the question, what is the moral case to be made for government to confiscate the property belonging to one American and giving it to another American to whom it does not belong? Now, limited government minimizes the probability of rape and coercion. Indeed, the essence of government is coercion. That's the essence of government. Government is the major source of organized rape all over the world, including our country. Now, some people will present the specious argument that we need big government to protect us against big business. You hear that a lot in the news and you hear it in college campuses, but it's nonsense. In a free market, businesses have no power over you and I. And you see this if you ask the question, what must happen for Exxon to get $1 out of me? Well, I must voluntarily get out of my chair, voluntarily get into my car, and voluntarily drive in this man's lot and give him $1. That does not describe my relationship with government. Government can get dollars out of me whether I want to give it to them or not. But however, big business can get dollars out of us whether we want to give it to them or not. But they first have to go to Washington, D.C. and get permission to rip us off. Now you take Lee Iacocca. Several years ago, he was having trouble with his company, Chrysler. Or you take the farmers. In many places in the country, farmers are having problems. Now, Lee Iacocca and the farmers, they know where I live. I live in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. They could knock on my door and say, buddy, I'm having trouble, can you spare a dime? Now, I'd probably tell Lee Iacocca or the farmers to go play in the traffic. Now, they know that. And so what they'll do, they go, let's say the farmers. I'm not picking on farmers especially, but the farmers, they'll go to Senator Dole. And they say to Senator Dole, if we ask Williams to voluntarily help us out, he's going to tell us to go play in the traffic. So could you use your agents to take his money? That's how big business can get dollars from us, whether we want to give it to them or not. They have to go to Washington, D.C. or your state capital to get permission. Now, when I make a statement like this, don't misunderstand me. I think voluntarism is the way to help people out. I find that charity is noble. And matter of fact, Americans are the most charitable people on the face of the earth. That is, we do 85% of all world giving. Now, what you and I should do, we should promote, we should show the benefits of free markets in making our arguments to our fellow man against expansive government. We should recognize that the free market not only advances the human condition, but it promotes moral relationships among people. Consider for a moment the sources of income. Income is not distributed. I know economists make a whole lot, talk about income distribution, as if there's a dollar dealer out there saying 1 for you, 2 for you, and 3 for you, and 4 for you. There's no dollar dealer out there. And if you had that vision of the sources of income, you come up with the phony notion that if some people have more dollars than other people, it's because the dollar dealer is a racist, a sexist, a multinationalist, a colonialist, and justice requires redealing of the dollars, income redistribution. But in a free society, income doesn't happen that way. Income is determined by how well we serve our fellow man. And we serve our fellow man in a number of ways. We bag his groceries, we teach his children, we entertain him, we heal his wounds. And by doing so, by serving our fellow man, let's say my going out and mowing your lawn, you give me $20, I serve you. And what is that $20? What does it really mean? It is a certificate of performance. It is evidence that I've served my fellow man, and that means that I can take this $20 into a grocery store and demand $20 worth of what my fellow man produced. In other words, the free market tells us that we do not have a claim on what our fellow man produces unless we first serve him. Now, contrast this kind of morality with the immorality of the welfare state. The welfare state or government tells people, look, you don't have to serve your fellow man, Williams. You don't have to go out and mow his lawn on this hot summer day. You can sit on your butt and watch TV, and we will take what your fellow man produces and give it to you. That is immoral, in my opinion. Government allocation of resources enhances the potential for human conflict. Why? Because most government activity is a zero-sum game whereby one person's gain can only be achieved through a loss suffered by somebody else. When there's market allocation of resources, everybody wins, and it reduces conflict. You know, for example, I love three-piece suits. Other people, they like blue jeans. Now, when's the last time you've seen people who like blue jeans picketing people who like three-piece suits? You never see this. But however, you do see people picketing one another and engage in conflict when there's government allocation of resources. For example, I believe that any parent has the right to have his kids say a prayer in the morning in school. I believe any parent has the right for his kid not to say a prayer. But however, if there's government production of the schools, it's going to be either prayers or no prayers. And so the person who wants prayers, for example, he's going to have to enter in conflict with someone who does not want it. If there were private allocation of resources, we wouldn't have that problem. We could have conflict if we just put government in charge of clothing. I mean, if there's going to be either three-piece suits or jeans, I'm going to have to join others who like three-piece suits, and we're going to have to fight the jean people because I don't want to wear jeans. Let me begin to wind up here. Thomas Paine warned that government, even in its best state, is but a necessary evil, but in its worst state, an intolerable one. In order for government to perform its legitimate role, it must have resources. And the resources most likely will have to be obtained through taxation, which themselves constitute coercion. However, if government limits itself to the moral functions, its moral functions, that coercion is minimized. Now, how much hope can we have in wake of the recent elections? Well, I don't want to throw any cold water on all the high hopes, but H.L. Mencken, who was a political satirist of Baltimore Sun, somebody asked him what was the definition of an election. And H.L. Mencken said that government is a broker in pillage, and every election is an advance auction on the sale of stolen merchandise. Now, to the extent that H.L. Mencken is correct, we've identified many of the problems that we face in our country. That is, too many of us want to blame politicians for our problems. And yes, we can blame them. We can blame politicians for not being statesmen. We can blame them for being prostitutes and hustlers and thieves. But the bulk of the blame lies with you and I. Because politicians, for the most part, they're doing precisely what Americans send them to Washington to do. And that is to use the power of their office to take what belongs to one American and bring it back to some other American to whom it does not belong. You ask yourselves, how likely is it for a politician or senator to win office, let's say in Illinois, if he campaigned, he said, look, if you elect me to Washington, you send me to Washington, I'm not going to bring back highway construction funds, Meals on Wheels, raise Social Security COLAs, aid to higher education. It's not likely that he's going to get elected to office. Why? Because he's not doing what his constituents would want him to do. So the bulk of the blame lies with you and I. The problem is, each politician doing what his constituents wants adds up to something none of us wants, such as economic stagnation, inflation, deficits, national debt, and moral decline. I don't know whether the recent election results will move us away from business as usual, but I'm willing to give the Republicans a chance. I'm willing to give them 6 months. And if they can't deliver on their promises, I'm willing to pursue another alternative. You know, last year I wrote I've been writing a nationally syndicated column for 15 years. And last October, October 1993, I wrote a column that brought me in the most favorable mail that I've ever received. In that column, I began saying that I think it is about time that liberty-minded Americans start thinking about secession. And I was telling my readers I'm not an expert on secession, but I thought that maybe liberty-minded Americans should keep the 13 original states plus Texas and give the socialists the rest of it with an option to buy it. But I've come to some other conclusions since then, and that is just kind of split the country up along the Mississippi. Now, a lot of people have said to me, well, Williams, you know, the last secession attempt was a disaster. But I point out to them that the first one was a winner. So we're at least batting 500. But the job is for you and I to sell the moral superiority of liberty and limited government. Thank you very much.